The Department of Justice placed one of its top immigration lawyers on leave after that lawyer questioned in court the Trump administration's handling of the deportation of a Maryland man to El Salvador. The man was deported in error. A federal judge ruled the Trump administration acted illegally by mistakenly deporting Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The judge ordered the 29-year-old man must be returned to the United States. Joining me is Jeremy Rosenthal, a nationally recognized prosecuting and defense attorney and legal analyst. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Bruce. How are you?
Great. Thanks for being here. Attorney General Pam Bondi confirmed that Erez Ravini, who represented the government, was suspended. Bondi said any attorney who fails to abide by this direction will face consequences. Was Ravini's job to be loyal to serve a client and the Constitution or the administration?
That's a great question, Bruce. One of the things as attorneys that we have to balance is we do have a lot of competing, a lot of overlapping, and at times we have conflicting directives for how we do our jobs. You do have, as Ms. Bondi points out, a duty to zealously advocate for your client, whether that be an insurance company, whether that be the United States of America, whether that be a criminally accused person. You have a duty to zealously advocate. When you're a prosecutor, you have a duty to seek what's in the best interest of justice. And all lawyers have what's called a duty of candor to the tribunal. And what that means is that when a judge is asking you questions, you have to be honest with them and you have to be sincere with them. You have to argue the law. And what makes being a lawyer so difficult at times is you have to take those positions within the boundaries of the facts and the law and make those persuasive. And that's what Mr. Ravini was doing. He was being pelted question after question after question by this judge. And you're not allowed, because of the duty to candor, to say, nah, nah, nah. You're not allowed to plug your ears. You're not allowed to say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? So that's what makes, in many instances, being a lawyer so challenging. And when Ms. Bondi comes out and makes a directive that says, no, you're going to do it this way and no other way, it's very concerning because as a lawyer, you're not very persuasive when you're unreasonable. You're not very persuasive when you're insincere. You're not persuasive when you're oppositional. So it shows in some ways a potentially very misdirected understanding of what it means just to be a lawyer.
You use the word justice. Does what we're seeing undermine the fundamental professional ethics that federal prosecutors are there to do, serve justice?
It certainly can. Again, when you are any kind of a lawyer, that duty of candor is important, and it's lasting, and it's what separates lawyers, people arguing in a courtroom, from people who are arguing on Facebook. We have to be honest with the court, and that doesn't mean necessarily that you concede that you're wrong about the law, and that doesn't mean that you concede that you lose about a certain case. And take, for instance, what happened late last night or yesterday afternoon, which was the Department of Justice actually conceded that they were wrong to the U.S. Supreme Court. We accidentally deported this man. Now, maybe they were stuck with that because of Mr. Ravini's previous admission that they were wrong, but they still said, but we've got a bigger problem, Judge, and that is we're not exactly in a position to return him at the moment, even though we're ordered to do so. That's a perfect example of arguing within the bounds of the law, saying we made a mistake, but we're still right. And that's what prosecutors do that can be in the best interest of justice.
So, Ravini basically said in Garcia's case, the evidence wasn't there. A federal judge said the evidence to deport this Maryland father wasn't there. Ravini said it wasn't there. You were a prosecutor. If the evidence doesn't exist, what is your responsibility as a prosecutor? Dismiss the case?
Again, what you do, prosecutors all over the country in every jurisdiction very effectively and persuasively argue points where they have to concede at least some mistake, at least some error. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we know that this wasn't handled properly, but we still win because of X, Y, and Z. They do that very frequently. So just because you're wrong on a certain point doesn't mean you're wrong overall about the law. And to kind of bring it full circle, that's what effective advocacy is taking and zealously advocating a position which can sometimes be very challenged and very nuanced to say, look, even though we're wrong about this, we're right about the entire thing. It makes you more persuasive and not less persuasive. And that's what's concerning when Miss Bondi comes out and says, thou shalt argue every case like this.
Let's talk about broadly what's happening with the DOJ. One analyst said what's happening is completely undermining the DOJ. This loyalty to the administration instead of the law, undermining it for a generation, detrimental to the country?
Look, there's a lot of really hardworking prosecutors, agents, a lot of people in the Department of Justice that are very good at their job. And there's a lot of them that simply won't be affected at this level of politics. They're prosecuting drug rings. They're prosecuting human trafficking rings. They're prosecuting all types of mail fraud, wire fraud. And not all of them are handling these types of hot button issues. But when the attorney general, when the head official comes out and makes kind of a really vague threat, which says if you don't zealously advocate for the United States of America, there will be consequences. It's really hard to know what that means. Does that mean you have to be loyal to the administration? Does that mean you have to make me happy with any arguments that you make? And if I decide that I don't like it later, you're in trouble. It's kind of like your big brother clenching their fist. And it's hard to fathom that the culture at the Department of Justice is anything other than of fear or hostility of the administration.
All right, we'll talk more about that fear and hostility because Jeremy is going to join me next week on Politics and Power. My friend, I appreciate your time.
Have a great day, Bruce.
You too.